Nous sommes ravis de vous accueillir ce matin à cette édition 2014 des résultats annuels.
Good morning, everyone. This session is streamed over the internet. Most of the questions will be taken in the room, but you can also ask questions online. The management board members who will present today also include Véronique Veil, CEO of the group, and we also have our marketing and distribution officers here in the room to answer your questions. Henri de Castres, the floor is yours. Thank you, Garance. Good morning, everyone. Comment on the results 2014, which for the group is a very positive financial year because we were able to continue to grow our market share and sales footprint over 100 million clients, because our revenues are increasing in a contrasted market. Our underlying earnings are the highest ever reached by the group. Net income is up 12%. And this demonstrates the group's capacity to generate high level and still growing results while continuing to accelerate its transformation plans. All of this also brings us to offer a significant increase of dividend at 95 cents per share versus a much lower amount last year. You can see that this growth comes from our three business lines and with evolutions that are slightly different, but we were expecting acceleration in life and savings, where here the growth is at plus 6%, and the underlying earnings are plus 14%. This is doing well all over the world, and where the product mix is continuing to change, and Dennis will tell you more later. Now, slightly less in P&C with a slight increase in revenue and also in the underlying result. Or we explain that by the number of natural disasters that were recorded in 2014, and they are greater in number to the average of the preceding years. But this, of course, should not hide very satisfactory results in other regions, such as France, for example. Many observers wanted to convince themselves that we had brought in positive flows of assets. You can see here that as regards the net inflow for asset management, we are at plus 22 billion euros. And AllianceBernstein has also returned to a positive situation after several difficult years. So our growth in business is contributing to our growth in revenue and therefore to the excellence of the financial year. We are also pursuing our efforts in emerging economies. You know that amongst the larger priorities of AXA Ambition, we wanted here to diversify, not just in product lines, but also in our geographies. And in this regard, 2014 was a useful and profitable year on several levels. We were able to accelerate the growth of our presence in Africa, which in our opinion will certainly grow in importance with the next generation. And these main markets play a very important role in the long-term aspects that I've just mentioned. If we look at the speed of our growth in Africa. We acquired Mansard Insurance in Nigeria. We also here have a strategic partnership with mBank in Poland, a high-quality bank, which also allows us to strengthen the impact of our distribution. And we also here are impacting the field at an international level even further in Brazil. And so if you analyze this from a long-term standpoint, we have invested about 1 billion euros per year in emerging economies. Also, what is important is that we have signed a partnership, and we are the only insurers to have a partnership of this type, with the International Finance Corporation, which is a subsidiary of the World Bank. This will help us accelerate the circulation of insurance in emerging countries, and they are evolving very quickly, as is demonstrated in the banking sector, and we will also therefore take advantage of these developments. Then innovation. Innovation is an important element. I was saying earlier on that in parallel with our significant and satisfactory results, we are continuing to work on our transformation, and particularly digital transformation. Last year, we had announced the creation of AXA Lab in San Francisco, and all of this is continuing to grow. We have launched recently AXA Strategic Ventures, which will allow us to take interests in companies that are currently being created, and thus to help us accelerate the transformation of our operational models. When we look at our investments in this field, they clearly reflect the fact that these are priority areas. We have invested 450 million in 2015 in digital, and we will have invested 950 million euros between 2013 and 2015 to improve the quality of service to our clients. We believe that our technological revolution is a quite significant one and an in-depth one as well. And more fundamentally, the acceleration of the transformation of our business model is essential. The technological revolution we are experiencing is equal to what happened to the industrial in the times of the Industrial Revolution at the end of the 19th century. So here we believe that there are stakes to modernize our distribution channels and to modernize our operational tools. And I think that we are in the right position to make this a success. If you have any questions, later on, Véronique Vell will be able to take them. As regards adapting and anticipating, there are other areas that I would like to underscore. I've talked about the innovation lab. Also, I would like to talk about the creation of a healthcare business line, and also, we had a suggestion made by one of our management board, the possibility of creating a healthcare line. We believe that this is a market that will grow in emerging economies. Our activities are quite competitive in some countries in this area, and should be used as a basis for future growth of our business. The AXA Fund for Research, we are continuing to invest or to motivate investments. This particular fund has, over the past 5 years, funded chairs in universities and in areas that are close to our business for over 100 million euros. Now, developing the employability of our youth, whether we're talking mature or emerging economies, in 2014, because we consider that this is an essential pillar of growth, and the group wants to be part of this market. We here have offered over 12,000 professional opportunities to our young in 2014, half of whom in Europe. So there is, of course, room for interesting job offers in Europe as well. So half in Europe and half of the half in France. In all, what does this point to? The landscape of a group with a very strong balance sheet, capacity to generate significant and growing results on a market where demand will continue to increase, although the global macroeconomic landscape remains fraught with uncertainty in view of geostrategic unrest, and also because from an economic standpoint, growth in European countries is slow and interest rates are low. But nonetheless, our group was able to generate results perfectly aligned with our long-term ambitions. You can see here on this particular slide, and I would like to attract your eye to what we can see here in 2014 and current profitability of shareholders' equity at 14.5%. So we are trying to be entrepreneurs and not people who live off their annuities. Now, on this conclusion, I'm going to give the floor to Jacques. Good morning. Thank you. So I will now present the main financial highlights in life and savings in 2014. The first slide gives you an idea of our level of protection and our economic and social positions for our clients. Savings in life insurance products increased by approximately 24 billion euros. In health and protection, we have paid out more than 11 billion euros, and 2 million of our clients also benefited from AXA assistance healthcare services. So I would now like to present the results of life savings and healthcare. Today, as Henry said, we have decided to create a global business line for healthcare in view of the growth and importance of this particular aspect. And we can see that these activities are combined with those of life and savings. So it is a very strategic activity for us. Our role is already significant in that area, particularly in France. But we would like to clearly demonstrate our ambitions internationally and grow this business in a greater depth over the coming years. In 2014, sales were quite dynamic, increasing by 6% in all for new business. Also, protection and healthcare, another priority segment, is plus 3%. It isn't that obvious on the slide because this is a comparable basis approach here. And, of course, the situation in Japan also may reduce numbers, but I can guarantee you that this is a like-for-like proposal. Then here, also, this activity was pulled forward by Asia, Southeast Asia, and India. Now, in UCs, unit-linked accounts, we see that this is supported by corporate pension funds, but also by our activities in Asia. And Germany and the US have also contributed very significantly to this growth. The General Savings Fund, you can see here, plus 11%, the win of 2 significant contracts for corporate retirement in France, and also multi-support evolutions in France and in Italy. And as regards our variables and others, you can see that the growth has remained stable year on year. We also here have a net inflow for 2014 of plus 4 billion euros. and is also driven by protection in healthcare and unit-linked. And the number could have been slightly above because we voluntarily bought out operations in the U.S. Also here, margin on new business is at 34% for the life and savings activity, which is an increase of 1 point versus 2013. Thank you. Next slide. I would now like to take a few minutes to reposition the financial highlights versus 2010. 2010 being the launch year of the strategic AXA Ambition plan. Since 2010, we have worked on a selective and profitable growth in the most promising sectors and on the most promising segments. We've seen that as regards the products where we want to grow our market share, protection and health, and unit-linked products that have known significant growth in 2014 and represent today over 70% of our sales. Whereas general funds products, savings products, are also diminishing in line with our ambition. Now, across from that, in emerging economies, we can see a growth of 14% thanks to India, China, and Southeast Asia. I am here thinking of our sales of HEBC that increased last year. So we here can record an average growth rate of our underlying earnings of approximately 27%, which naturally involves an increasing weight of these markets on the underlying earnings of the group, as well as on the net results of the group at circa 10%. So this confirms the shift that has been ongoing now for several years in protection and healthcare, and the growing weight of emerging economies in the global mix of our business. A few words, finally, as regards our underlying earnings pre-tax. It shows the significant part of the products that we believe to be not only the best for our clients, but also for the group in view of the context we find ourselves in today. Protection and unit-linked represent 70% of this activity. The post-tax underlying earnings also show strong growth. And I would also like to mention here the underlying earnings of the U.S., which represent approximately 1/4 of these results. Also, strong results from France, increasing by 8%. So, globally speaking, we can say that as regards life and savings and health, the year was a good one, and we're doing everything to maintain this trend. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Jack. Good morning, all. I am going to present the results of P&C at AXA in 2014. So first and foremost, a few financial highlights. What does P&C represent within the AXA group? As regards a revenue above 29 billion euros, 19 billion euros of compensation paid out to our clients in P&C. And this year, 160 million as regards the natural disasters. I'll return to this point in a while. Also, 4 million clients that are today clients of AXA Assistance, and those who are also protected and sometimes rescued by AXA Assistance after suffering a problem, for example, with their vehicle. And also, we have had digital exchanges that have helped us to develop our growth. And this is why these figures are so positive. Now, to return to the details of the presentation of results on the next slide. how, in fact, did things unfold in 2014. We have an increase in our revenue, and despite an economic context that was slowing down in many different geographies, and particularly in Europe. We can see through the growth of our activity on mature markets limited to 1%, which is aligned with our underwriting discipline that we do not budge away from. Also, growth for the present and the future for direct insurance and emerging economies. Direct insurance is staying at a very positive level, up 5%, and strong performances in the UK, France, and Japan. As regards the emerging market segment, the landscape is slightly different. Many of these markets have experienced a slowdown in their economic development, such as in Turkey, for example, where the insurance market is bearish as regards P&C, up around 3% for many, many years now. This was not the case. And this is one of the rare markets where growth is slow and not as significant as it was in the past. Solid growth in Asia was 7%. And the acquisitions, the latest investments, as Henry was recalling earlier on, show their worth. The Chinese activity is up plus 19% per year, but not yet consolidated in its financial statements. And at the end of 2013, through a JV with Colpatra, where we have a very high interest. Also, on emerging markets, we can see that the economic health is strong. Now, if we divide this business line, we can see insurance of individuals at plus 10%. And as regards our commercial lines, our insurance for corporations, we can see our growth at plus 2%. And on this particular segment, in the case of emerging markets, the share increases by 5%. So this is a global panorama of our business. Now, the next slide demonstrates also very positive results. We've seen the acceleration here on these as regards the business mix, where we have re-geared more towards enterprises, 41% today versus 38% in 2010. And if we include in these numbers the major risk segments of AXA Global Solutions, then we can see that the share of corporations in our business represents 45%. And this enterprise segment is one that requires more technical expertise, more specialists, and also involves strategic pillars for development. And this is, of course, the reason why we are considering this segment as a priority. Although we are dynamic as regards insurance of individuals or private persons, we also are focusing our growth on enterprises. The combined ratio that measures the technical capacity of our activity is all that much better that it is low. It has gone from 99.5% in 2010 to 96.9% in 2014, the goal being to bring it under 96%. Now, as regards the growth that is specific to the results obtained in emerging and direct markets, we want to grow on these markets, but we want to do this in a profitable manner. And since 2010, we have multiplied by a factor of almost 4 at 3.8% the contribution to the global results of these two markets in emerging economies and on direct markets. And this economy today represents 15% of the underlying earnings in P&C. So growth of this business in the construction of our results. As Henri de Castro was saying in his introduction, we maintained the reinforcement of our presence in these areas in 2014, particularly with an establishment of our presence in Nigeria with the Mansart acquisition. And also we are currently looking into the launch of activities in Egypt. So a growing share of our exposure to these high growth markets that we are working on in a selective and quite organized manner. Next slide. How did 2014 unravel from a technical standpoint, and what was the impact of natural events? First of all, we were exposed to two very large-scale natural disasters. First of all, the hailstorm Ella that impacted the north of Europe, France, Belgium, and Germany, and quite significantly, with very high-level claims that covered 270 million euros in expenses in our accounts. And also the worst hurricane in Southern California since Vilma about 10 years ago. And this also had a very heavy impact on our payouts. Now the combined ratio nonetheless represented 1.9% in 2014, and we think that this has been generalized as an impact on the group's current combined ratio. Now at 0.8% in 2013 of 4 natural disasters, we are now at 1.9%. So the current combined ratio has also slightly improved from 97.8% in 2013 to 97.6% in 2014, which which mirror the way in which we have technically dealt with these aspects. Now, the total combined ratio that I mentioned in the preceding slide, and to compare current results with prior results, we have a slight deterioration, but nonetheless we can display here 2.3% growth in results to reach to 2 billion odd euros. And this is a standardized amount, standardized by 1 point as regards natural disasters. Our result would, in under average conditions, have grown by 13%. So 2014 was a good year, despite the very significant and atypical weight of these natural disasters. 2 major events, one in Europe, one in Mexico, and we were still able to pursue our ambitions. And as regards profitability and the way in which we steer our growth efforts on emerging markets, also we have put the emphasis on the digital transformation of our activities, and we are more and more involved in drawing the benefits of technology through, for example, topical insurance contracts in Italy and in France, for example, for young drivers. And also we are beginning to work much more in depth on big data to be able to enrich our offer, particularly for what we call the parametric insurance in the world of farming that was launched in 2014. So we are online with our chartered course, and we will continue to develop our strategy. And I'm now going to give the floor to Nicolas Moreau, who will explain more and illustrate this further with AXA France numbers. Right. Good morning, everyone. So here I would like to zoom in on AXA France. In 2014, AXA France results were solid, very robust, with strong sales growth because our revenue grew by 6% to 21.2 billion euros in life and P&C, with a result at 1.239 billion euros. If you see how these underlying earnings have been dispatched, you will see that there are percentages of interest here in savings, 24%, P&C, protection and healthcare, and unit linked. Now, if we look at individual insurance, for example, we can see here a strong commercial performance. We have continued to have positive inflow of policies in motor at 34,000 and HR 2,000. This year, about 12% of our motor clients came to us by internet. And if we, of course, here take our agents in France, they have seen 23% of their new motor business come in also from the internet. And the efforts we've made in the preceding years are bearing fruit, and we can see very strong traffic coming in through this channel. Our combined ratio is at 97.2%, up versus 2013, due to less releases in bonuses for 2014. The combined ratio here associated with this year's underwriting average, and this one is improved by 0.3%, despite an increase in the claims ratio. We believe that it is, in fact, the usage of cell phones, for example, that can be considered as the culprits of physical damage related accidents in the car. Also, we have also had to deal with the natural disasters such as hailstorms in June and all of the storms last fall. Now, as far as individual insurance is concerned, our sales increased quite significantly. Unit-linked products also saw a growth of 23%, a very significant share, and with a share of unit-linked of 23%. So we were able to trigger the diversification of client portfolios in favor of unit-linked products. Also, individual insurance, a growth of 12% in new business at 283,000. Of course, with different products such as funeral expenses, for example. Family protection at 184,000 new business, and Madelin products for professionals that have also seen growths of 19% versus last year, which is also a very good result. But the market of dependency has retracted in France slightly, and we assess its contraction to circa 30% this year. Now, if we look at what happened in 2014, you see that our commercial and operating results were quite solid, underlying and adjusted, and we here have worked on the transformation of the company through innovation. Now, this was focused on three different pillars. First of all, to grow the spirit of innovation, to reinvent the client journey or experience, and to improve our client knowledge. Now, innovation, we are trying to stimulate it in different ways. Henri did talk about investments in with the AXA Ventures, also in the AXA Seed Factory. And through the AXA Seed Factory, we made 5 investments in diversified areas, such as climate brokerage for climate risks, or investments in fund platforms or crowdfunding platforms on the internet. So a varied approach that is in sync with our business, whether this is on insurance or in savings, in order to grow and detect activities that will allow us to speed up our growth in our basic business, core business. We have also an internal challenge competition that is called Innov AXA. But of course, we contribute to group initiatives such as Start In. We work more and more in multi-expertise teams. We are trying to change the way in which we do business and to go from silos to more project and fully integrated teamwork. Also, we are trying to develop a digital approach. So we have at AXA France developed a digital tool to raise the awareness of all of our staff members to the need for digital transformation. The second aspect here is to reinvent the client experience or the client journey. And we here are working on the multi-access choice at AXA France by using our agent networks to make sure that the flows that come in through the net or mobiles or computers are dispatched to our agent network. And this is what we are currently doing with practically our entire range. We've transferred motor insurance. We can see very strong flows coming in from the internet. We are also working on healthcare and on home insurance. We are here, of course, shifting our entire range to multi-access channels in order to ensure that the client experience is as smooth as possible and that covers from underwriting to claims management and payment. So the e-observation project was launched by our profession in November. We have already succeeded, or our clients have already made 20 e-reports in the aftermath of car accidents or vehicle accidents. And here we have the declarations that are made on their cell phones. And this demonstrates a strong appetite for our clients, or for the French, as regards the simplification of their client journey. Now, this is very important, and we're working on all of this to be able to optimize the client experience. We're also working on the segmentation of our client, and we are developing segmented products with Switch by AXA and Soon that are products for the young. We're currently working on developing products for seniors because we consider that this market is growing impressively every year by 6%, actually. It's not an emerging market, but it is a high growth market. Where we need to adapt our product range and our approach and services to this aging population, knowing that when we talk about seniors, there are about 12 to 13 segments that have to be addressed, so we are working on such services. Now, increasing and improving our client knowledge. This is also essential for us. We call this smart data because we're between the big data and the small data, because we have data all over the board as an insurer. Working on data is essential. What we're trying to do is to derive information in order to improve client retention, higher quality services, better adapted to what they do and what they need. So we have made strong investments to be able to know our clients better. This is one of the pillars to improve client knowledge, and our client knowledge in particular, and also services that are diversified, that include more prevention, helping them to improve their behaviors so that their premium levels can drop and their client experience improve. Last point is Mon AXA. It's something I presented in November, essential for us, allowing you or your clients to have your full relationship with AXA in your pocket, literally. So we are working on the connected objects in-house and in people's residences that will be activated with Mon Accent. We've decided to work on an open platform to welcome a large number of connected objects. This is not a closed circuit where we only work with one or the other provider, but we can welcome all the range of existing connected objects, so that we can improve the prevention of risks for our clients. So a solid year in terms of results, and much work on the digital transformation to serve our clients better. Thank you. Thank you, Nicholas. Good morning, all. I am now going to present the main numbers regarding asset management. First of all, the AUM have increased by 16% versus the end of 2013. This year, we have had a positive net inflow of 22 billion euros, but also a very favorable market impact and a positive impact on exchange rates at the end of the year. In all, the group manages over 1 billion assets under management, 1,277,000,000. Now, net inflow is very important, 19 billion euros at AXA IM in net inflow and 3 billion at AB. Which can be compared with 12 billion at AXA IM last year, and negative inflow last year of minus 4 billion, so very clear improvement in situations. The underlying earnings remain stable at 403 million euros, a growth of 6% if we included the disposal of AXA P private equity in 2013. Now, this result can be explained by the underlying earnings of both asset managers that were good. Now, let us go into the synthetic approach of financial year 2014. The underlying earnings grew above 5 billion euros, a record high since the beginning of our history. 41% in P&C international insurance, 26% in protection and healthcare, and 33% in savings and asset management. We can see here a growth in 5% in the group's underlying earnings. So we are quite aligned with our goals. Here, activities in life insurance and individual insurance that are less sensitive to market fluctuations give us very interesting results as well. Being a more effective group is also one of the priorities in our strategic plan. Since 2011, we have brought in 1.6 billion in efficiency gains, productivity gains, and the ambition today between 2011 and 2015 places us at 1.9 billion. We are, of course, investing massively in our transformation, particularly as regards digital. These investments represent 1.5 billion and 450 million dedicated or earmarked for digital to improve our client experience, particularly through mobile phones or mobile objects. As Nicholas mentioned, we have developed claims management platforms, and this is a policy that we intend to pursue to benefit from all of the existing technological advances. We're also here modernizing our distribution channels through multi-access proposals that Nicholas described at length. But this change is in France, as it is in all of our geographies, such as an example of the Germany-based virtual agency. Also here, we can see a growth in our adjusted earnings at plus 7%, and you can see that we have an increase in these adjusted earnings that have gone from 5,162,000 to 5,503,000 in 2014. This, of course, is the result of a hike in our realized net capital gains, and our policy and P&L that I will return to does not make it possible to highlight these capital gains. Here we have gone as regards net results at plus 12% growth, including 251 million in depreciation, an impairment on the value of our participation in Rizzo in Russia. And this, of course, has had a positive impact on the group's results in 2014. Now, our balance sheet at the end of 2014, our financial robustness is high. Our shareholder equity, historically high at above 65 billion euros, an increase of over 12 billion in 1 year. Now, of course, the contribution of the net income, but also the drop in interest rates and favorable exchange rates. Our solvency ratios at our high levels. Solvency 1 is at 266% at 11.42 points. The economic solvency, prefiguring solvability 2, is at 201%, slightly down versus 2013 due to the drop in interest rates. And 201% is twice the regulatory requirement. Then our gearing ratio is stable at 24%, therefore perfectly aligned with the objective we set for ourselves within the framework of AXA Ambition. That was initially 25%, and that we have since adjusted to between 23 and 25%. Now, a few words on the balance sheet and matched assets. Here, essentially, as regards our general fund, the general fund represents 523 billion euros, highly continuous in asset allocation year on year. This allocation is guided by our preoccupation to help our assets correspond to our engagements vis-a-vis our policyholders. Also, you can see that we have assets of a duration of 7 years, engagements for 8 years. So a difference between assets and liabilities that remain fairly stable over 1 year, which allows us to amortize the impact of the interest rates that seem to not be budging. Initially, we were at 3.7% in an area, and on P&C at 3.9%, but the investments that were carried out in 2014 were at an average of 2.7%. Now, if we go on to the next slide, dividends, we are going to propose to the shareholders meeting a dividend per share of 95 cents, up 17% versus 2013. Higher than 2013. This corresponds to a distribution rate of 45% of our adjusted earnings, and usually we distribute between 40 and 50% of this amount. So we are middle ground. Also, high performance in 2014 and a hike in operational cash flows at 5.5 billion euros. Also, progression in our adjusted earnings and a solid balance sheet. Thank you for your attention, and I now return the floor to Henri de Castries for his conclusion. Thank you, Dennis. The conclusion will be easy. 2014 was a very good year, and we are going to maintain our efforts to make sure that 2014 is a good one and a happy one. Any questions? Yes, I'll ask you to please stand, introduce yourself so that those who are listening to us on the net are able to identify you. I know that we already have one or two questions in. Where's the mic? Good morning, Julien Parot, Correspondance Économique. I would like to know how you assessed the future decision of the European Central Bank as regards its asset buyback policy, and whether you at AXA are interested in this. Do you have any assets to sell? And also, what would be the amount if you are interested? Well, we, of course, have a very favorable eye on the European Central Bank that has had a very straightforward approach for many years. But we also keep in mind that the monetary policy is not the beginning in the end. It will only work and it will be useful if in parallel the governments undertake the necessary transformation projects. I've already compared the European Bank to the anesthetic physician, making surgery less painful. Now, as regards assets, we have a purchasing and selling policy. It's not really in our interest to sell to the central bank. Next question. Yes. Muriel Brennan, Investir. CNP Insurance said last week that they were going to speed up their share investments. Will AXA adopt the same policy in 2015? Now, CNP Insurance has essentially a French balance sheet. Ours is more global. The answer is yes, but yes. We have slightly increased our investment in shares without waiting for the announcement of the CMP. Also, when we had clear signals that quantitative easing was going to actually be implemented, and we here need to budget a budget of maximum risk. So we've done this, but modestly. Virginie Le Neville, Jiffy Hebdo. I was looking at the weight of emerging markets, and I can see that their share is dropping. And secondly, I wanted to know whether the pace of 1 billion in investments would be continued. What is the share of this in your result? What was the targeted amount? And which countries are of greater interest to you? I'm going to start to answer and then give Jean-Laurent and Dennis the numbers that are available in our presentations. As regards to 1 billion euro, it is an observed average. It is not an obligation to spend. Of course, we try to increase our presence in emerging economies. The deal with Monsanto Nigeria is an example, but we're not going to make it obligatory for us to spend 1 billion per year. What counts is not the spend, but the strategy that backs the spend. And we intend to pursue our approach on the market. Also, the access through technology makes things much smoother. And countries having abundant workforces available are, of course, favorable to the development of business in the emerging economies such as Asia, but also in Latin America, as Jean-Laurent Granier reminded us of. We today are in Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico, and planning to conquer Africa tomorrow. There is absolutely no reason for us to stop our operations in these geographies. We have here, in fact, been in emerging markets only when the legal frameworks give us the satisfactory conditions that we require to do our job well. Also, the determination to continue to grow there is dampened by the availability and cost of potential investments. I imagine that people are going to be talking about the the hurricane in Mexico. As regards the specific question in emerging markets, the combined ratio showed a slight deterioration in 2014 from 98.2 to 98.7, essentially explained by this significant hurricane called Odile that devastated Lower California. And also, as regards the scope of the emerging markets for 4.7 billion euro in result for the group, the relative weight of this event is quite significant, but this does not jeopardize our interest in these markets, because this was a natural disaster that impacted here the West Coast, which was very strange because usually these hurricanes impact the East Coast. Also, it is, secondly, one of the worst hurricanes in history in a part where our market share was large, which explains that this is a spot event. And more largely, a comment I would like to make on the emerging markets is that this is a world that is progressing fast. This is also a world where new technologies are being implemented much more regularly and much more widely. But these markets have still not reached the level of maturity that we can find on other mature markets, particularly in geographies that are more exposed to natural disasters. Another part of the question, the share of the emerging markets represent 15% of our results, which is what Jack told us earlier on. And in P&C this year, we have had a small accident, but I think that we should expect higher volatility in P&C due to natural disasters. Yes, hello. Lionel Garnier, Le Revenu. I have three brief questions. Impairment on Russia corresponds to impairment on overvaluation, on degraded business conditions. What are the assumptions that have led to this impairment? I'd also like you to shed light on the difference between your new investments that show profitability at 2.7, as Mr. Duvin was saying earlier on, which is lower than that of your current portfolio. How do you manage this difficulty, which could perhaps in the future result in balance sheet related constraints? Now, as regards your unrealized capital gains, they increase strongly year to year. I have the impression that they increase by half of the general fund. What is your view on this matter? And will you maintain your policy to not take out capital gains on your bond portfolio? In Russia, the investment was made in 2008. At a time where the price of oil was much, much higher than $100. The economic perspectives of Russia were quite favorable then. The Russian economy is very strongly impacted by the current level of the oil prices, also impacted by economic sanctions. And we here have reassessed our economic and development perspectives for P&C as a function of the economic situation of Russia today. And this has led us to impair a large share of the goodwill we had on these operations. And this is why 251 million euros. Now, this does not result from a poor performance of the enterprise, but rather to the deterioration of our provisions regarding the growth of this market, our perspectives. You know, we regularly explain that we have a portfolio with a yield of 3.7% with guaranteed rates at 2.1%. So the guaranteed rate is very important, and we have also a difference at 160 basis points, and we have a margin of 80% for the past 2 years of investments. Now, on the products that we sell, the average rate that is guaranteed is at 2.4. So when we invest at 2.7, when our guaranteed rate is at 0.4, percent, and based on the way in which we can work our investment margin. Now, the situation will be different country to country. Of course, there are countries where we are closer to guaranteed rates, but globally speaking, we manage this dynamically, and we are not overly preoccupied by these evolutions, even though the rates may stay low for a long while. But we try to motivate our client to not give their priority in investments to the general fund where they will get lower rates, but to turn to unit-linked products. Third question, as regards unrealized capital gains, the impact of the exchange rate is not really significant. I don't have the number in mind, says the speaker, but of course, the interest rate wave, and it was strong in all geographies, and the drop was also visible in Japan, US, Switzerland, UK, and so there was a drop in the interest rate all over the board, and this, of course, can be seen in its impact on the unrealized capital gains. What is the residual amount in Russia? A little over about 2/3 of our goodwill was depreciated here. At the back. Hi. From AMSA, the Italian agency, 2 small questions on Italy. The first, as regards the reforms in popular banks, meaning that some banks will do away with some of their business segments, such as asset management. Would you be interested in this in any way? And also, I would like to know what is your participation as well in the Italian bank, and also, do you envisage Italian capital joining other investors in the bank? We have a small interest in the bank, only a few percentage points, and the 2 JVs and Insure that are continuing to grow and where results are strong. We are monitoring the increase in the bank's capital, of course, and we do not want to reduce our exposure as regards popular banks and asset management. We will see what we need as regards asset management within AXA IM or AllianceBernstein, and whether these teams can develop new products. We have some that are being developed in-house. Maybe we can find some elsewhere. Our goal being to grow our distribution. We're not particularly interested in buying traditional asset management classes with high costs. Yes? Grégoire Pinson from Challenge. A question for Nicolas Moreau. How do you explain the significant drop in the dependency policies? Is this a spot problem? Is it a choice on your part? No, not at all. Our market share has increased on a market that has been reduced, that has shrunk. It is not a choice. I think that it is, if individual dependency market has dropped in France this year, it is due to a lower purchasing power. And also there wasn't an emphasis put by the media on the dependency. The government has not encouraged the coverage of this type of risk. In 2014, dependency was forgotten in France, so to speak, and in fact, it's the market as a whole that dropped. We have 33% market share on individual dependency, while we launched our product only 3 years ago. We signed our large group policy, a policy that represents 4 million per year, and the group has decided to protect its own staff. Dependency is a frustrating area. It's an area that we try to work on, and Nicholas, of course, has mentioned the products, etc. But as citizens, it is a debate that we all know about. The only thing that is missing is a concrete action plan, and as we discuss, the problem is becoming worse. Other questions? Hi. This is an Italian question from Radio Call. What is your exact investment in Monte Paschi? 317 or 370? Okay, it's 370. Now about governance. Are you going to suggest again, Mrs. Bernard, to become a member of the board of directors? Are you also favorable with the change or maintaining the head of the bank itself? And also, would you like to acquire the share within Monte Paschi of another Italian bank, or perhaps the acquisition by a foreign group? What would you like better, actually, she asks. We prefer the best solution for Monte Paschi. And we are here supporting Mr. Viola and Mr. Profumo's work. Yes, Béatrice de Rouvois-Bernard, who is the director representing AXA at the bank, we have proposed that her mandate be renewed. And we do wish to maintain Mr. Profumo and Mr. Viola on the board as long as possible, because they've done tremendous work since they've been on that board. Is there a question, a written question or sent-in question, maybe?
We have 2 questions from Paul Davis of the Wall Street Journal. He asked, do you have a very clear view of what your capital needs will be under Solvency II? Is it the increase in your dividend payout ratio a signal of your comfort with that? Or is it more to do with better cash flow from the US and other regions just now? Thank you.
Good. The answer is both. I mean, cash flows are strong, earnings are strong. We are very comfortable moving within the payout range of the we had announced. You may remember that we said that we would pay between 40 and 50. We had stayed at the bottom. We are, with 95 cents, paying 45%. So it's a reflect of the confidence of the group when we look forward. Do we know exactly, clearly, very precisely, by the point, what the requirements are going to be for Solvency II? No, because there are still some negotiations pending. But we have reasonable hopes with the approval of the internal model that we are going to come to a resolution of this issue in the course of 2015. Question suivante.
Next question. From Reuters, I would like to know whether the change in governance in French groups as regards changes and modifications to different functions such as managing directors, etc. Is this something that you're envisaging to do for AXA as regards savings? You say that you expect to reach your objectives by end 2015. Can we increase this objective of 1.9 billion? As regards governance, there is a change in some sectors where governance needs to be changed mandatorily. This is not the case in our area. We changed ours in on several occasions in the past. We were in supervisory board and management board. Before we were in the more traditional approach. Now we are again in a more traditional approach. It really depends on the company's situation and that of its management teams at a given moment in the company's history. An answer to the first question. The second aspect involved our economic objectives. We said 1.9 billion at least. We here had a 1.5. It was increased from 1.5 to 1.7, and then from 1.7 to 1.9, and now we're saying 1.59. And since such things never come on their own, 1.9 seems to be here the right level. Next question. Hi, Anne de Guignot, Figaro. The AXA 2015 plan is coming to maturity. And can you give us the details of your current thoughts on this issue? Well, we will give you the answer to that question in the details of the first half year of 2016. But to give you some answer, I'm saying this because we need to complete AXA Ambition 2010-2015. We still have a whole financial year to cover in 2015. Now, we are working on reaching the objectives, but there is much uncertainty. There are many geopolitical aspects that we need to keep in mind, and we are doing our best to help the group succeed. But what are the major issues, in fact? We need to make use of the very solid base that the group created in terms of geography, know-how, and so on, to be able to adapt to a changing world. And the impact of digital on the service industry is considerable. It changes the nature of our relation with the client, the type of products we sell, the relationships between people in the companies themselves, and we need to see how we can take a better position geographically on our markets. But we must also essentially look at how we're going to build the economic approach to tomorrow within the companies. Are we going to use big data in the future to gain better knowledge on our consumers, on our clients, to give them better quality services? How are we going to use digital to be able to invent new services and create new services? AXA's capacity to accompany the transformation of civil society in its economic and financial aspects will have to be organized. Do we conclude on this note? Thank you very much and have a nice day, ladies and gentlemen.